Great. Everybody, welcome to NFA Live, or Not Financial Advice Live. This is episode number 50. Can you believe it? We've made it all the way to 50. We're halfway there to 100. Congratulations, we did it. As always, I'm welcomed by not an AI simulation guy from Coin Bureau. Guy, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what an AI simulation would say. So you're going to have to take my word for it. But yeah, good to be here.
Well, that's what we go by. We just assume that it's not a scam here. Just kidding. And then, of course, as always, Benjamin Cowan from In the Cryptoverse. How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, I'll be pretty good if I actually bought some NVIDIA stock, which we're going to start off with today. So, as you guys may have heard, actually, before we get into that, as a reminder, if you guys are not subscribed to these two gentlemen's channel, they got great content. Ben just put out a banger of a video. What would a hard landing even look like? It's long, but it's interesting. It's only an hour and 16 minutes, only to be trumped by his latest Bitcoin dominance video, which was an hour and 25 minutes, which was really good, actually. And also another one I liked is the market cycle ROI. On top of that, you got a guy over at Coin Bureau. This is a must watch. ETH Layer 2 is ready to pump. I didn't watch this one here, but this one scared the hell out of me about the AI and banning essentially free speech. And this one with Arthur Hayes with Jessica. If you haven't watched that one, it makes you really want to follow Arthur Hayes, that's for sure. And then, of course, Coin Bureau clips, which you had my guy, Alex Fossil from Swissborg. So thanks. And I guess another one I got to watch, Top D-Pin Picks, Sweet TSA. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Anyhow, let's talk about this. NVIDIA, apparently, it just blew up the world. And it looks like their revenue is up massively. And I don't know what the price action is going to be, because I don't think the markets are open yet. But it looks like things are on the right track. So first of all, I always felt this was a narrative. Ben, inform us what's going on with NVIDIA, how big this is. And then Guy, if you could talk to us about AI picks. So Ben, we'll start with you and go from there.
Well, according to the options market, the implied move for NVIDIA after earnings was 11%. And it actually is trading right now in its pre-market. It's up about 11%, in fact. So it's currently at 752, which is a new high, in fact.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, I think the world was going into NVIDIA earnings, wondering if they were going to beat or not. And they did, right? They beat earnings per share, right? They were beating their revenue. And so now, naturally, it was funny because the market initially sold off. NVIDIA initially sold off down into the 640s or something, 650s. And then it just popped all the way back up. So I guess the AI party is still going on, at least for a little while. I know some people have sort of compared it to sort of the Cisco run, 20 years ago. And there are some similarities. There's also some differences as well. I think the margins on NVIDIA are a bit better than what Cisco had back then. But in the actual sort of like the move, the percent gain in the move, it's been pretty similar over the last 5 or 6 years. And Cisco ended up topping out in, I believe it was March of 2000. And it's funny because it ended up topping out on still really great numbers, which was kind of interesting. And I mean, again, I think it was because the labor market was starting to show some signs of weakness around that same time. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something to keep an eye on. The NASDAQ is up. Obviously, the S&P is up. And yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Did we hit an all-time high for S&P 500?
Yes. Well, you mean today?
No, like this week, or was it that last week? Have we? Because I know we went over 5.
Yeah, we hit new highs back in mid-January, in fact.
Okay.
We only had to go above like 48.18 or so to get a new high. So we did that. We did that back in mid-January, and then we just continued. The S&P has just continued to grind higher ever since. It has pulled back a little bit over the last week or so, but oftentimes the back half of February it gets a pullback in the election year, and then it theoretically continues the move.
Excellent. Well, let's see how it goes. I mean, everybody talks about how, well, it's great. The stock market's doing fantastic. That means the good things. It could, but just remember that apparently Japan is in a recession. I think the Nikkei, however you say it, just hit its all-time high. So take that for what it's worth.
I've seen a lot of people say, well, if that's what a recession is like, I guess they're not so bad.
Exactly. Which actually
I think the counterpoint is that oftentimes markets are at all-time highs as they hit.
Yeah, we'll see exactly what happens. It makes you wonder, like, because people say, well, Bitcoin's never been through a recession. I mean, you can make an argument, but I mean, we can see what's going to happen in 2024, 2025. If we hit a recession, hey, we hit a recession. Maybe we get out of it.
Technically, it did go through a recession because technically 2020. But
yeah, you know how it is, the pervasive sickness. So, Guy, same thing here. Not just about that, but we know that if NVIDIA is doing great, the AI narrative is really picking up steam. And you guys have done a great amount or different amounts of videos on AI. What are we looking for as far as like the AI projects? And I will just say for everybody, if you're curious about it, before Guy rips off some of the things that he's has talked about, but if you go to CoinGecko.com and click on categories, if you scroll down, I think it's 24 here, you can see that artificial intelligence, it'll give you just a huge listing of all the different things that are up by market cap, and you can kind of go from there. But Guy, real quick, what does this mean to you as far as the AI play that's out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have started covering, AI stuff. It's mostly been around, kind of AI policy. That last video that we did that you mentioned is focused on this absolutely crazy. I think it was a House hearing on how governments are funding AI tools in order to for the purposes of online censorship. It's scary. There's some scary stuff that AI is being used for, or is that people are planning to use it for. And I think that sort of that ties into my sort of first point around AI. And I think this is something that most people, I think, will have noticed in that centralized AI, that coming from the likes of OpenAI, Google, etc. These big centralized companies. That is a big risk because it appears to be taking on the biases of its creators. And there's been tons of stuff all over crypto Twitter and many other places about how we're already seeing kind of political bias from these AIs, and that is a really worrying trend. So I think in terms of this makes the case as strong as anything can for decentralization in AI. If we do get some truly decentralized AI projects that don't take on these creators' biases and can be quote unquote credibly neutral, for want of a better term, then that is definitely preferable to what we have at the moment. In terms of AI cryptos, and I'm glad you brought that list up, Rob, because it's it is worth looking at. You take a look. There are the top 3 AI cryptos: Bit and Saw, Render, and Fetch.ai. Obviously, they've all been apart from Bit and Saw, have been pumping like crazy recently. Or those 3 all have market caps over 1 billion. I couldn't tell you with any sort of degree of authority what those particular projects actually do. And this is the case for pretty much all these AI projects at the moment. And I don't, it might seem a bit unfair to kind of lump all these AI projects in together, because what we have at the moment is a huge amount of cryptos, popping up all the time with AI in the name. Most of them, we don't really know in what way they're looking to leverage AI. A lot of them are just going to turn out to be, vaporware,
trash.
Essentially. Exactly. They're going to turn out to be trash because, back when, was it 2017 when some companies figured out that if you just put blockchain in your company name, you can watch your stock price go absolutely insane. And I think we're definitely in that sort of phase again. We've got cryptos popping up, .ai or AI.this or whatever, and boom, to the moon. So and that speaks to me. That says to me that we're in an enormous bubble, and at some point we're going to have to, the wheat and the chaff are going to have to get separated. And I guess it's going to probably take that bubble to burst, and then we'll know which AI cryptos are legit and which ones weren't ever going to come to anything, which ones really were trash. And that's that doesn't make it very easy picking these AIs, but picking any of these AI picks, I must say I haven't touched any of them because I don't know for sure yet, and I need to. It's something that I need to spend a lot more time on, trying to discern. Like, are these things really using AI, and what are they going to offer that others aren't? So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. And I think the big question is where the AI narrative goes next, because at the moment the focus is all on the infrastructure. It seems to me, the picks and shovels that you sell during a gold rush. And obviously, when it comes to AI, the picks and shovels are these chips that NVIDIA is selling. Which, by the way, apparently someone was saying these NVIDIA chips use as much energy as an American home in a year, and these things are being shipped out in the millions just within the United States. So I think that is going to cause some issues in itself. Like where are we going to find just the power just the electricity to run these things? But that's a question for another time. But I think, so where does the AI narrative go from here? Because at the moment, as I say, it's infrastructure, it's chips. Right. But we saw this in the .com bubble that Ben was referencing. Eventually people will have all the picks and shovels that they need. So where do we go then? And my guess would be that the big winners from AI then will perhaps be like publicly traded companies that can leverage AI the most effectively. So maybe something like Adobe, because Adobe does a lot of its stuff is related to like content generation, images and things like that. And ChatGPT and is it Sora, this latest offering from OpenAI
for the video?
That they're very much focused on that. So,
and of course, Skynet.
Yeah, of course, Skynet guy.
Skynet. Yeah. So I think, where does it go? Like what happens when we have all the picks and shovels? One of the areas that I'm bullish on when it comes to crypto, I should bring this back to crypto a little bit, because that's what you were asking about. As well as a heck of a lot of electricity to run all this AI stuff. It's also going to need an enormous amount of data storage. And that's one of the reasons why I think decentralized data storage could be, it kind of feeds into this deep in narrative, decentralized physical infrastructure, which a lot of people are getting very excited about, myself included. So I think, that stuff could be, maybe that is a better thing to watch at the moment. Things like decentralized data storage and decentralized cloud computing. And I think if you go back to that list of AI cryptos, what's interesting is that you see a cash network at number 4 on that list. I mean, that is decentralized cloud computing, for instance. And I think there are some, storage protocols on there as well, so on that list as well. So that could be, the area that benefits first. I think we're still very much in the picks and shovels phase. The question is, when does that phase end, and what do we get at that point? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm still kind of digging into these AI cryptos, but at the moment, it's so risky, because so many of them are just trash, are just .ai, buy me now.
See, first of all, this is why I appreciate both you guys for being on the show. First of all, Guy said, and he made it very clear, I don't know all these different projects, which is something is the opposite you're going to hear in a lot of different places. It's like, oh, I know it's this and I know it's that. And in all honesty, no one really knows for sure every single project is out there and know the technicals and really have like a solid, fantastic understanding. Really, it's just very tough to do that. And then and then just to move on and to talk about like how we all differ. like when you said that, you said like it's very risky, and Ben will probably agree with you. These kind of plays are risky. I kind of look at it as like a different way. I'm like, well, if it's risky, and Ben, and answer me this real quick about bubbles. Last time we went through 2021, how long did we have like an altcoin rally after Bitcoin topped out? I mean, it kind of going into it, because we're talking about Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin usually goes up, then the altcoins come after that. And even if they're trash, they still run up. But how long does it, on average, does it take?
Well, it depends. I mean, so in 2021, Bitcoin topped in April, and then alts rallied for about a month. But you have to remember that, like, for all intents and purposes, I mean, Bitcoin basically topped in like February. I mean, because they hit like 58K and then it just slowly grinded higher. So if you think about it like that, I mean, altcoins were rallying basically from January through May. And then Ethereum is the one that finally kind of had its final rally in May, and then everything came crashing down. But if you go back to 2017, Bitcoin put in an all-time high, or it put in its high the week of December 17th. And the altcoins then rallied collectively for about 3 more weeks. Some of them rallied longer and put in new highs, even like February and March. But most of them were done. But the trick, Rob, and I think this is an important point, is that there's no guarantee that the all-time high comes, right? If it comes, then that's where you can see that rotation. If it doesn't come, like you get a 2019 type rally where you don't put in a high, that's where you don't get the rotation into altcoins, and that's where the altcoin market tops the same time as Bitcoin. And so you have to be careful. It's all about if it goes to new highs, what essentially happens is a lot of the Bitcoiners who've been holding their Bitcoin, they then go sell it, and they just flood into the altcoin market. But if you get a 2019 type rally, and the all-time high doesn't actually happen, then all these people that have Bitcoin didn't really get the opportunity that they were probably hoping for to sort of sell off their Bitcoin at a new high. So I think it kind of depends on if you hit new highs or not.
Yeah, I can see it for the all-time highs, of course, how it usually, goes to that pattern. But like, again, this is why I appreciate both of you, because there's different perspectives. Like when I hear Guy, I'm like, okay, I can see that. And when I hear you, it makes me a little bit more conservative. But then in the back of my head, I'm always thinking to myself, okay, there's opportunity there. There's opportunity in somewhere to do this, but then it's super risky. So everybody that, of course, is listening to me right now is going, is Rob giving financial advice? Absolutely not. Maybe degenerate gambling advice at the very maximum, but there is opportunities out there. And if look no further than this interview that Jessica did with Arthur Hayes when he talked about what he's doing as far as like these different altcoins. But that's neither here nor there. And then lastly, I will just say this about Guy. Guy, you're very modest as far as like, I don't really know too much of these things, because when I was checking out on Coin Bureau Club, these last 6 that you did, Metal Blockchain, Claros, Relio, Rollbit, Metis, DeSo, did you know that from the time that you did that video to now on this one, you're up like 200%? On this one, Claros, when you did it, you were at 0.013. And now you're at 0.022. Again, another 100x. This one's even better, I think. 16 cents to 84 cents. Not too bad.
Rio did well. Yeah.
Yeah. Metis, $16. Now it's at $85. Okay, this one you led me astray.
Now, Rob, let me just stop you there, Rob. Which one of those do you think I hold one of those in my portfolio? Which one do you think it is?
I know exactly which one it is. It's this one. Because I've seen your portfolio and I'm like, well, that looks pretty good. But I'm like, I got to diversify a little bit. So yeah. So Guy, for these things that you talk about, you guys, that's why I like your channel. That's why I like Ben's channel, because they give me the research and then I can also go and verify it, which helps me out a ton. So thank you guys for that. I just wanted to mention that before we move on to the next piece. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Yes.
That's a reminder, guys, if you're here from my channel and you crave that altcoin discussions, these 2 channels, I think you're going to find, I mean, Rob's channel and Guy's channel, they talk about that a lot. And I think those are some of the best channels to watch that stuff on.
Thank you, Ben. However, when we get into the strategies, we have to talk about my number one tool that I use, which is your website for my risk endeavors. Anyhow, before we get into that, there's this question I've kind of been rumbling around in my head. And it's not going to be very popular. I'm just going to tell you right now. And it goes like this. Michael Saylor. So he came out not too long ago, and he talks about this quite a bit. He says, you should never sell your Bitcoin. You should never sell your Bitcoin because, of course, it's the hardest asset out there. It's going to constantly appreciate. Yes, there will be dips, but over cycles, you're going to come out ahead. And I asked this question somewhere. I said, look, I go, if this is the question where you should never sell your Bitcoin, then what do you do with it? Like, because you can't take loans against it, right? Because I've done that myself and it didn't work out too hot with Celsius. Of course, I got ripped off there. You can't use it for goods and services because essentially you're selling it at that point. You can't use it as collateral against anybody else because they're going to have your keys and not your keys, not your crypto. So the question I had for both of you is, if you believe what Michael Saylor talks about, you should never sell your Bitcoin, then what do you do with it? And then the last thing I'll say is, like, some people will tell me, well, it's for my kids and grandkids. Well, if that's the case, then what do you tell your kids and grandkids? Then you can't sell it either because this will constantly appreciate. So who wants to take that hot fire one?
I mean, I can.
Well, I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't mind leading off on it.
All right.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's a great question. I think, as I think you sort of alluded to, Rob, the fact that, Michael Saylor, it's all very well for Michael Saylor, multi-billionaire Michael Saylor, to say, don't sell your Bitcoin, when he owns a sizable stack of it, more than virtually anyone else. And speaks as someone who likely doesn't really need to buy anything. What more does he need? But I mean, I think it's a good question to ask, because he's right in so many ways, and no one, I should say, I don't want to be rude about Michael Saylor, because no one has kind of done more to spread the word of Bitcoin than he has.
True.
So it is the hardest asset out there. So if I was looking to offload Bitcoin, if I was looking to offload BTC for something else, then it would have to be, for me, it would have to be another hard asset. Sure. I don't see it as something, to be spent on necessarily sort of goods and services. It would have to be another asset that can't easily be multiplied. And there aren't many things that fall into that category for me. Something like a house, okay, you might say, well, they build new houses all the time. If you're saying that, you ain't ever been to the UK. I tell you, the housing crisis there is, and many other countries, is getting seriously bad. Oh, yeah. So
right.
I would say a house. I'd also say land as well. There's a finite amount of land on this earth, and it's something that I would like to own in future. And I think that, for me, might be worth some Bitcoin in the future. And I think, as well as being a hard asset, as well as exchanging Bitcoin for another hard asset, I think there are also things that have value beyond just money. And land and a house, I think, fall into that category. But also things like education and healthcare.
Right.
I've finished my formal education for what it was worth. But if my nieces and nephews, of whom I have several, they may want to go to university in the future. I would consider an investment in their education. I would consider that to be, to have a value way beyond any money. And again, I could see myself parting with some Bitcoin for that. Healthcare, you only have one body, you only have one life. You've got to look after it. So, is Bitcoin, if I needed, or someone close to me needed, an emergency operation of some sort, a life-saving operation, sure, I'd spend some BTC if it came to that. So, yeah, I see Bitcoin as a way to build wealth, to build right. something, something that you hold, not as money to spend. And as a hedge against whatever the future might hold, because we don't know. The fiat currencies are eventually going to zero. They're losing value every single day, and Bitcoin is my insurance policy against that outcome.
Excellent. Yeah, I got to agree with all those points. It makes a lot of sense to me, especially for the education for healthcare. Ben, same thing. How do you see it working out? How do you write this?
Well, one of the reasons why, I talk about dominance so much is because do you ever like go to the store and you think about like, hey, I want to buy this thing, but then you're like, oh, well, how much Bitcoin would that be equivalent to? Or how much insert random altcoin would that be equivalent to? I think a lot of people go through that at some point. And so the reason why the dominance is important is because like it's sort of like it represents kind of like the the Bitcoin standard, basically, like the you're saving in Bitcoin. And you are, it doesn't mean that you never sell it, but it means that whenever you make a decision about something, the idea is, well, is it going to bleed against Bitcoin, or is it not? I mean, I talk a lot about how altcoins are bleeding to Bitcoin, but the actual same concept can be applied to basically every asset class. Like, micro cap companies are bleeding to the Magnificent Seven, right?
Yeah.
We saw Rivian and Lucid earnings come out yesterday, and they both got hammered after hours.
Right.
If you pull up the Lucid Tesla chart or the Rivian Tesla chart, those micro cap EV companies bleed to Tesla, right? And so it's the same idea. And I think the sort of Bitcoin is kind of what your base is rather than US dollars, right? You're thinking about it, all right, well, if dominance of Bitcoin's going up, it means that everything's basically bleeding back to it. So let me think about it like that. I am someone that, does enjoy taking profits on it whenever it goes into the bubble mania phase, because we know how brutal the 2 years after that can be. But the reality is, history would show that the hodlers, if you will, like the people that just kind of hold it, no matter what throughout the years, they're also winners, right? They have been winners for a long time. We could always enter a period where, it's flat for a while or something, but over the long haul, I would expect to go higher. And the reason is because, I mean, this society is built on inflation. I mean, like, everything inflates in value over time. Well, not everything, but you ideally are finding those things that are at least keeping pace with inflation. And I think Bitcoin has proven itself to be that. So yeah, I would sell, I've sold Bitcoin before. I agree with Guy. I mean, I think selling it for things like real estate can make sense. Sometimes you just want to sell it and put it in, and keep it in cash or stable coins for a little while and wait for the market to cool off. Depending on the nature of the bubble, if it's like a 2019 bubble or a 2021 bubble, depending on the nature of it, you might sell some of that mania, sell it into that mania phase and then go speculate on some of the other cryptocurrencies. So I think there's all sorts of ways that you could use it to speculate. But I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I have found that I've been thinking about recently is it's not really the price. It's not like all the exactly where they are. It's basically, I think time is like, I've sat here and I've watched some of these charts. Like, I've watched this Bitcoin dominance chart go up for the last, year and a half to 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like I was right about it. And then I'm like, yeah, but I also just spent the last 2 years of my life watching this stupid chart.
Like we all have been.
Yeah. So then there's this other part of me that thinks like, yeah, like that's all important and stuff. But I think as I go through more and more cycles, I'm going to not like focus as much on the day-to-day stuff, because it's so consuming. And I want to look back on my life and be like, yeah, I did more than just look at this, the Bitcoin dominance chart or the ETH Bitcoin chart or all this stuff. I mean, think about how many years these trends have been going on for and how long it takes to play out. I think time is something that at the end of the day, in 50 years, Bitcoin, I mean, it's not necessarily going to buy you more time,
Right.
And so that's something I think we all have to remember. You still have to live your life, and the way that you live your life is to occasionally use your Bitcoin to buy things that will improve your life, like I was talking about.
Yeah, perfectly said. And it goes like this. It's because I always look at it and I think to myself, and not to get philosophical, but what is wealth? And to me, wealth is time. Wealth is doing the things that I want to do with my time. It's being able to be with my family, be with my wife, be with my friends, and doing that at any time that I really want to. So like Bitcoin is not those things. Bitcoin is not time. Bitcoin is not the happiness that gives to me, but Bitcoin can give you those things, but it is not those things. That's the whole thing I'm trying to say. So that will lead me to my next point, because Guy, you were talking about moving Bitcoin and other assets. Ben was just talking about the same thing of putting in other assets. So what does that look like then? Because let's be honest, we're going to probably see a monster rally coming up. I think we're going to have a major, massive bull run. I could be wrong. I thought we got screwed out of one in 2021. But if we do that, I think we should have a plan going into it. So how does that plan look for you as far as taking profits down the road? And then what do you do with those profits? Do you stick them in a bank and have it, with dirty fiat just sitting there, inflating away? Or how does this look?
Do you have that chart, or you want me to pull it out?
If you could, because you do better with moving around your own site than me. It's like you're talking to an infant when I'm doing it.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different indicators you can use, actually. So like I use this is what I use, like this risk level for Bitcoin. And basically the idea is I take some profits as it goes up, and I buy when it's down here. So the last time I bought Bitcoin was late 2022. Did not buy any altcoins. It is what it is.
But he admits it, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, admit it. Excellent.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes sort of the idea of like, how do I it's hard to sell something I don't have, right? But I did buy Bitcoin, and I do have, I think there's some case to be made that like no matter what happens, like it's okay to hold like a certain percent in Bitcoin, right? So like you have your hodl stack, and then your stack that you actually are willing to part with at certain times in the attempts to try to time some of these bubbles. But yeah, so what I do is I buy it below 0.4 risk. So when it's below here, I will DCA into Bitcoin.
Let me see. Okay.
Yeah, so when it's below here, this 0.4 risk level, I will DCA into Bitcoin. And then between 0.4 to 0.6, I don't do a thing. I just come on here and talk about crypto with you guys. I don't sell it. I'm not buying it. I'm just happy, happy no matter what. And the idea is try, to not stress so much about what way it actually goes, but to say, hey, if it goes back down here to 0.4 risk, that means I will buy some. But if it goes up here, then that means I will sell some. And so what I do is when it gets into the 0.6 risk band and up, that's where I'm open to at least taking some profits. And I mean, it's hard to know exactly the extent that the bubble will go. Like over here, there's several instances where we went to the to the highest risk band, like the 0.9 to 1 risk band. But there's also cases where we topped out in the 0.8 to 0.9 risk band, or like 2019, we topped out in the 0.6 to 0.7 risk band, right? So the problem is that until we go forward from here, a few years, we don't know without the benefit of hindsight where it's going to top out. And so what I do is I use, it's called dynamic DCA. So like between 0.6 to 0.7, the idea is I would sell 1/10 of my Bitcoin, which sounds like a pretty small amount, but it's basically to say, hey, if it ends up being a top like 2019, then I want to have at least sold something, right? Like I don't want to watch a 3x, 4x move happen and not take any profits off the table, right? Like imagine it goes to say 60K or something, which would be around what it did back then. And then if you watched it go all the way back down near the lows, I mean, I know that sounds absolutely absurd and good chance it doesn't happen, but I mean, that's basically what happened back then. So I think there's a case to be made to take some profits off the table as you get into the risk levels that you're comfortable with selling in. And then what I do is when it gets to 0.7 to 0.8, then I would sell 2/10 of the Bitcoin, and then 0.8 to 0.9, 3/10, and then 0.9 to 1, I would essentially just sell the rest of it from the stack that I'm willing to sell. I think it always makes sense to have like a hodl stack. So that way, the way it works is you sell a small amount here so that there's actually some incentive for you to want it to go down, right?
Right.
You sold a little bit of it, but you also have a much greater incentive to watch it go up because you still have 90%. But as you go through the risk bands, and that percentage becomes less and less, then your incentive, your incentive becomes increasingly more that you would want to see it go back down as it gets up to these highest risk levels. So that's what I do, and I've tried to make that clear many times. I mean, I talk a lot about what Bitcoin might do in the short term, but all I do is trade the risk levels. By the way, there's a lot of other charts that you can use as well, besides this stuff. And I think one of them that everyone knows is the fear and greed index. I mean, that's a great one, I think, to at least get some idea of what's going on. Do note that in the 2021 rally, we were basically in extreme greed for months before. I mean, if you had sold all your Bitcoin when it went to 90, you would have been selling it all at 15K, back in 2020.
Exactly.
So like, I don't think you should take this indicator to the bank, but a counterpoint is that when it went to 90 in 2019, it literally marked the top. So it really does depend, I think, on the nature of each rally, and that's why I talk about the all Bitcoin valuations over all USD valuations, because Bitcoin continues to sort of lead the charge. But that's what I primarily use, just the risk metric, and I try to tune everything else out. Although it's really hard to do that sometimes, but that's what I try to do.
Well, especially with where we're at, especially as we're always on X. All right, Guy, my man. Same question, but also I want to add something else to it. The strategy, and then what do you do with those profits?
Okay. Well, my strategy is very simple. I'm just waiting to start selling when Ben starts buying.
It's not a bad. That's a good indicator to use. I got to tell you. And you know what? I got to tell you. Everybody tells me on my channel, they go, when Ben starts buying alts, that's when I'm going to start to load up. And I was like, yeah. I mean, when Ben goes in alts, it's a done deal.
No, that's when it's season started.
That's it. But okay, so guys, so that's your plan. Not a bad plan.
I'm never talking about Bitcoin dominance again after this cycle.
Hey man, some of us still love to watch those videos, and I'm still waiting for that 2-hour video. But Guy, real quick, what do you do with those profits? You talked about assets. Because cash is great. Cash is really good, especially when we're going to like these monster dips, and then we can really get back in. If you had like one Bitcoin and you sold that, in 2021 and got 60K out, and then of course it crashes to 15 or 20K, now you can essentially buy 3 Bitcoin. Congratulations, you're way ahead of the game. So like, how do you do it, or what's the plan going forward, I guess?
Well, yeah. First of all, all altcoins will be on the table to sell, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to make the mistakes of the previous cycle when I got too sentimental about certain holdings. So one of my big plans this time around is to be a lot more ruthless, a lot more kind of dead-eyed when it comes to that. So that's the first thing. Anything apart from Bitcoin is on the table to sell. Some of those profits probably will find their way into Bitcoin eventually. It may be that I have to hold those profits in stables for a time, waiting for Bitcoin to go lower, which I'm happy doing. I'm happy to sort of take stables into self custody and sit on them for as long as needs be.
Yeah.
A lot will depend just on my personal circumstances at the time, and I think this is something worth reminding people, because everyone's circumstances are different. So if you're, if you need to do so, if you need a roof over your head, for instance, if you've been wanting to buy a house for however long, and that opportunity arises because of the profits that you're able to make from crypto, then not financial advice, but that's something you should consider doing. Because you might not sell the top. No one sells the top, or very, very few people sell the top. But selling, taking profits, and then investing that into something that you genuinely need or have wanted for a very long time, that is infinite. And missing the top, that is infinitely preferable to round tripping it all the way back down again. So your time horizon, time frame is really, really important, and every single person's is different in some way.
Excellent.
Mine will be, at the moment, I'm not too sure. Katie, my wife, and I are sort of relatively new out here in Dubai, so we sort of settled a bit. So we may look to buy some property here in Dubai. but we may not. I'm still sort of working out my particular time frame and my particular sell prices as well. Because that's how I'll look to do it. I will have certain targets for each altcoin, and when they reach those targets, that is when I will have some sell orders placed. Consider selling. I won't sell everything in one go, most likely. But I haven't worked out those price targets yet. But that is something we're still, because I think we're still a little away from that. But yeah, in terms of to answer your main question, Rob, what will it find its way into? It'll kind of, I was talking about those sort of hard assets earlier, but it will be very much be what I need at the time, and I will be happy to hold profits in stables for as long as is needed.
Yeah. Excellent. Well said. And then, so like all these things that we just talked about, and I've thought this on the show, is that once you're into asset accumulation, you're never off this hamster wheel. So it's always, you have assets, you put them into cash sits there for a while. It doesn't sit there forever. You go into other assets, and then you just kind of weave yourself through until you find the perfect equilibrium for what you want to do. And that would lead me to pretty much our last question, which is this. Now that we talked about, our plan and we're getting into assets, let's talk about the big thing, taxes. No one likes to talk about taxes. I like to talk about taxes because they scare the hell out of me. So how do you guys deal with your taxes when you're going to sell this? What's the strategy? And is there anything that you use? Do you use like a spreadsheet? Do you use like a lawyer, a CPA, a software, or what? And whoever wants to take this one can just jump on in.
I just use a CPA.
CPA.
I mean, living in the United States, if you're going to sell your Bitcoin, you should have a pretty good reason to sell it if you're going to be paying short-term capital gains.
Right.
So I typically try to hold whatever I have for at least a year, because otherwise, think about it like this. Like, if you sell your Bitcoin and then you buy it back for 20% less, but you're paying like, I don't know, like 35% taxes or something on the like it has to be worthwhile, right? I mean, and I think that's the thing to remember, is that you do have to pay taxes. And actually, what happens to a lot of people, and just kind of like a fair warning for people, what often happens in these sort of in the bubble mania phases, is that people will make a lot of money, and they will book those profits, meaning they have to pay taxes on those trades, and then the following year they'll lose everything and the market crashes before they actually have to pay the tax man, right? So like, that's an issue, because then they won't have the money. That's what happened in 2017, 2018. If people remember, is that like a lot of people made money in 2017.
Yeah.
But they continued to gamble it in 2018, and then they lost a lot of it, but they still had to pay taxes on what they made in 2017. And so that was a way that a lot of people, I think, got burned. So you just have to remember that taxes are a very important part. And if you're going to make the trade, it theoretically should be worthwhile to make from a tax point of view.
Well said. So CPA. Guy, what do you do over there? CPA as well? Lawyer, spreadsheet, software?
It's even simpler, Rob. We don't pay tax in Dubai.
That's what it was. However, okay, here's a question for you, Guy, though. But if you don't pay taxes, I know you had crypto from a long time ago. So when you brought those over to Dubai, is that tax as well? Because it's before your Dubai residency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on whether I've sold that, whether I've realized that gain.
Right.
And the vast majority of the crypto that I hold is, I've been holding, or certainly, because most of my portfolio is BTC and ETH.
True.
Most of that I've held for a very long time. I mean, I do use a spreadsheet, and I use Coinly. That's Coinly with a K, for portfolio tracking, and they also have a tax software as well, which I gather is pretty good. I mean, I would say to people, like, from experience of paying taxes back in the UK, I think if you're dealing with a reasonable amount of crypto, this goes back to what we were talking about. The idea of time. Time is an asset that you can't make more of.
Right.
So if you have an accountant who can do this stuff for you, I would, and you can afford to pay them, I recommend doing that, because spending time on crypto taxes, I mean, it's a nightmare, as many people will know. So if it's something that you can afford, I think it's money well spent, because it's time.
Time.
But yeah, you need to be pretty meticulous, and it's hard. I mean, some people. I mean, I'm not even in any way degenerate when compared to some of the people out there. When you consider all the people airdrop farming and doing sort of weird voodoo in DeFi and buying and setting, trading dozens of times a day, how they keep track of it, I don't know. I mean, keep it as simple as you can, and ideally move to a jurisdiction where you don't have to pay personal income tax.
I've got to agree with you on that one. So for me, like, people ask me the same question, like, why do you always talk about taxes? Because you're in Puerto Rico. Don't you pay no capital gains tax? That is true. Unfortunately, all the crypto that I brought with me in 2021, I have to pay capital gains taxes on that. Now it's long-term capital gains, but I'm going to need something to, move that forward. Now, there was one thing someone said this, fandom says, tracker shill from Dan and Cumming, and I will not disappoint. So first of all, Guy had a good one with Coinly, crypto tax report in 20 minutes. I always talk about Coin Ledger, where I say it takes me 30 minutes. That's a pretty good one. But yeah, this will be the third year I use them straight. They have a portfolio tracking that's free. So you can put all your information in, and it'll tell you, like, here's your capital gains, here's how much you're up, here's how much you're down. And that part is free. Now, for both of these things, everything we talked about, I don't think you guys need those if you've done like 10 or 20 trades. But if you've done a ton of trades, then maybe you want to take a look at something like that, and to make your life easier. But that's it for today, everybody. So a lot of information in a short amount of time. Well, 45 minutes or so. But again, I want to thank these two guys for coming on. I appreciate it, especially the difference of opinions, and especially how we're doing things. But now let's open it up for a little Q&A. But if you got to take off, take off. Thanks for stopping by. Hit the like and subscribe on the way out. Let's go to the Q&A. Well, this isn't a question, but I thought it was interesting. I'm at the airport here in Newark, New Jersey, and there's ads all over the place for Grayscale GBTC. I don't know if you guys have heard this. I don't know if you guys have gotten any more calls. I've gotten calls from family. Gotten calls from old friends I haven't talked to in a while about, should I buy Bitcoin? Should I buy this? I don't know what you guys have gone through.
My dad has been asking about it because he bought at 49. So I'm now getting... Guy, I'm in profit, I believe. Yes, Dad.
Yes, you are.
Not financial advice, Dad, but yeah, this is one of my, this is a big indicator for me about where we are in the cycle and how close we are to a raging bull market is when people who haven't shown any interest in crypto whatsoever over the past few years start sliding into your DMs and what have you. And that, apart from my dad, that is not happening for me. So I think that's why I think we're still early in this bull market.
Yeah, I think we're still early. We're still going to get that same. Here's another question. It was interesting from Meme. If stables are pegged to the dollar, why hold in stables? Why not just put in the dollar? It's just that I want to control the keys, or is there other value to doing everything in stables? What's your thoughts on this?
I mean, for me, it's mostly, yeah, I can hold the keys. I can take them into my personal wallet. If I need to, I can cash them out into fiat. But also, it means that I have the opportunity. If I see, if I see something dip that I want to buy, it's relatively easy to move back in and sort of swoop. So, yeah, and I trust certain stables a lot more than I did 1, 2, 3 years ago. So but self-custody is the important aspect of that. If you're leaving stables on an exchange or whatever, then that's not for me.
Yeah. Ben, when you sell, is it right to cash or stables?
It used to be cash, it used to be stables in prior cycles, but now I just go to cash if it's gonna, if I'm just going to a fiat or like cash equivalent. Like I'm not gonna, I'm not too, optimistic. I mean, I guess like I hope that all these stable coins survive, but like, watching everything that happened back in 2022 with some of those stable coins and watching, what was it, the Luna one, go to
Yeah.
zero. Fortunately, I didn't. Fortunately, I didn't even hold any of that one. But I don't, for what I want in the, sort of control over, I'll just have as Bitcoin, and beyond that, I'll just keep it as in cash and just put it in like a money market account, rather than keep it in stables. I think that one of the reasons, at least last cycle, that it made sense to keep some in stables was because you could get yield for it, right? Like you could get it, a decent yield that was, like 5%, 6%. But that was when the risk-free rate was at basically 0%, right? Like with your cash, you couldn't get anything, but now you can get 5 to 5.5%, with US dollars, which is not something that you could get 4 years ago. So yeah, I think that it for me, it's still, I'll stick mostly with cash for now.
I don't blame you.
In terms of over stable coins.
It's a thing that I didn't really think about, because we always talk about how we learned a lesson, for the FTXs, the Voyager, the Celsius, and the BlockFis to go into cold storage. But, there's a lesson there for Luna and its stable coin that anything can go at any moment. And even the stables. So it's a good thing to remember.
Rob, even USDC got, lost its peg for a little while, and look, it regained it, and I mean the market cap of that one is going back up, and I hope that it goes on to be a large player. But I think the scary part was that there have to have been some people that sold their USDC when it was off the peg, right? Because they were fearful that it was going to go to zero, because they just watched the one with Luna, like the UST or whatever. They watched that one collapse. Mm-hmm. And that is something I don't ever want to put myself in the position of like having all my dollars like in a stable coin, watching it like lose the peg, and then being like, wait, like, do I sell it for a 10% haircut? And say, all right, well, at least I got some money back, or do I wait it out and just really hope it doesn't go to zero? And I think after watching, and by the way, I got out of stable coins like in like February or March of 2022, like before all that stablecoin drama happened. But it did show me that I never want to put myself in that position. And again, I mean, I know during good times, like we've been in, no one cares about that stuff. But when the market, when markets turn and we worry about that stuff, I don't want to have to think about, is it safe? I think it's relatively safer in other ways than stable.
Yeah. And that would, it's the same thing. But and of course, here in the people will talk about, well, banks can fail, and we've seen this.
Yeah, but they're also FDIC insured up to a certain amount, and if you spread it out enough, I mean, it's still insured.
Yeah, no, you're right. In America,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but then like because I always say the same thing, which is don't forget to take profits. And then people remind me, people in Turkey took profits, Rob. And look what happened to them. I'm like, okay, you got a point. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, there's always these little nuances, which is why I kind of actually appreciate my comment section, which is a lot of trolls, but I have an addiction to that. So it's kind of fun. Let's see. John says off-ramping to fiat in the UK is a nightmare. I don't have a problem here in America. Guy, you got any problems over there? And well, you're in the UK and Dubai.
Well, yeah, I haven't off-ramped to fiat in the UK in a very long time. But I do hear it. Yeah, I'm hearing from a lot of people that it's just, it is a nightmare. So I have a lot of sympathy for John there. So far, off-ramping in the UAE, I haven't done. In fact, the only off-ramping I've done has been to see whether I can off-ramp. So far, it's been okay. But because the UAE is on the FATF grey list, the banks here are subject to some pretty strict rules. So yeah, that is something that I'm thinking about for the bull market. It's sort of like that could become an issue. And yeah, so it's not entirely straightforward, but so far I haven't had any problems. But like I say, I've only sort of tested it out.
That I remember two or three shows ago, we talked about this, and the question was from Ben about, what are you guys doing to prepare yourself for the blow off top? And you got a good point. You talked about contacting all of the exchanges to make sure that you have limits set, higher than what you presently have, because during the massive bull run, they're not going to listen to you because there's too many people. So I guess there's another wrinkle we should be talking about, which is if you think that you're going to off ramp a bunch of your banks, make sure that you contact your banks and go, look, this is what's happening. Can I have limits increased? Before they're like, where the hell did this $1 million come from? Oh yeah, that was a great trade I did on Bonk or whatever. So yeah, it's one of those things. And then last,
I think it's worth sorry to interrupt. I think it's worth, everyone at this stage of the market, like this is kind of boring stuff, getting your exchange account sorted, testing all your off ramps and on ramps, etc. But this is good stuff to do now, to like you say, get in touch with your bank if that's possible. Try a few test transactions, try on ramping and off ramping, because, you want to make sure that it works. Make sure that your exchange accounts, for instance, are, or, if they require KYC, make sure they're KYC'd, do all that kind of boring admin-y stuff. Because, like as you hinted at, Rob, when the markets get really crazy, these exchanges will be overwhelmed. They won't have enough customer support. There'll be huge backlogs of people trying to on ramp and off ramp, complaints, questions, etc. So you need to make sure that you've done that stuff beforehand, so as you're prepared. And now is as good a time as any.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Yeah, if you wait for it to become a problem, then it's hard to solve it.
That's the truth.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, some people say, well, I'm not going to give my bank information they don't need. But I got to tell you, everything that I've ever wanted to get done is because I knew somebody somewhere, and the bank is no different, especially if you're talking about business loans and things like that. If I know somebody, things get smooth. And if I don't, it's a big pain in the ass. Last question. What if a company like Ledger goes bankrupt? How can I pull my crypto out of blockchain while private key works somewhere else as well? And I know, like, Guy, your favorite cold storage wallet, I think, is a Trezor. Ben, I want to say it's probably a Ledger, I'm guessing. Mine's a Tangem. But I'm just going to tell everybody that that's not how it works. If the company goes down, your private keys can be imported into any different cold storage device, and you can pull it all out. So it doesn't really matter. So I wanted to answer that because Concert Live asked that question like 5 times. I want to make sure he didn't flip out. All right.
Good question.
It's a good question.
It's a really common question, actually. Like, a lot of people have that question. Because I think a lot of new people to crypto, that is a very obvious question to ask, that, like, how does it work? But yeah, like, it's great because you don't actually have to have that to access it.
Well, it makes sense. And then, of course, if everybody's new to this, there's 2 people you should check out. You got Ben into the cryptoverse, and you got Guy and his multiple plethora of different channels that are out there. Everything you want to know is right there. But that's it for today, everybody. We're coming up on an hour. So again, Ben, Guy, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. And everybody that watched the video, thanks so much. Like and subscribe on your way out, and we'll see you next week on Guy's channel, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.